"Don't touch that lunchbox." The lunch monitor's voice dropped to a calm whisper as she snapped the silver lock shut. "Some things don't belong in this school." Naomi Carter's fingers trembled, but she didn't step back. Instead, she pressed her palm against the dented metal as if she could protect what was inside. "My mama said never let anyone open it," she whispered. Across the marble cafeteria, laughter continued, forks tapping plates, life pretending not to notice the small girl being erased in front of everyone. And then the key fell. It didn't make a sound at first, just a soft metallic kiss against the floor, but every head turned anyway. The silver key lay half-wrapped in a stained napkin, its engraved bird catching the overhead light like something alive. That was when the billionaire stopped walking. Nathaniel Whitmore had been mid-step beside the headmaster, adjusting his cuff as he always did before meetings, when something invisible pulled him forward and then stopped him cold. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like someone had turned off the warmth behind his eyes. "Where did she get that?" he asked, but his voice didn't sound like a question. It sounded like a memory breaking open. No one answered him. Not the headmaster. Not the lunch monitor. Not even Naomi. The cafeteria air shifted, heavy and wrong, as if the room had suddenly remembered something it had spent years trying to forget. Naomi crouched slowly, not to hide, but to reach for the fallen key, her small fingers closing around it like it belonged to her more than anything else in the room. "Don't let them throw it away," she said quietly, looking straight at Nathaniel for the first time. And in that moment he saw it, the faint burn mark along the edge of the silver, a scar only visible if you already knew it had survived fire, and behind it, a past he had buried so deep it should have never found daylight again. The key was still warm in Naomi's hand, even though no one had touched it for years, or at least that was how it felt. Nathaniel Whitmore didn't move at first. He just stared at it the way people stare at something that refuses to belong in the present. Then he slowly knelt, not to take it but to see it closer. His eyes tracked the faint burn mark along its edge again, and something inside him tightened, like a memory trying to surface through water. "Who gave you this?" he asked softly. Naomi hesitated, glancing toward the lunch monitor, then back to him. "My mama didn't give it," she said carefully. "She hid it. She said someone might come looking if they knew it was still working." The word "working" made Nathaniel pause. Behind them, the cafeteria returned to motion too quickly, too normally. Forks clinking, students whispering, a teacher laughing too loudly near the juice station. But the air around the key didn't return to normal. Stayed tense, like a held breath. Nathaniel pulled out his phone and took a single photo of the key without touching it, then opened a secure folder labeled Archive 12. Naomi watched him carefully, her small body still, but her eyes tracking every movement like she was memorizing it. "Does it open something?" she asked suddenly. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked past her, toward the cafeteria windows, where rain had started to streak down the glass in thin, uneven lines. Somewhere behind the kitchen, a television was playing a muted morning program, the sound bleeding faintly into the room. A coffee receipt fluttered on a nearby table. 2 drinks, one never touched. Then Nathaniel noticed something else. Veronica Hale, standing too far away to be casual, checking her phone again and again with a stiffness that didn't match boredom. His gaze dropped to Naomi's lunchbox on the floor. The lock had been reapplied, but the scratch near the hinge was new, fresh metal exposed, as if someone had tried to open it after it was already sealed. Naomi quietly slipped the key into her pocket, pressing her hand over it protectively. "Mama said if I ever showed it to the wrong person," she whispered, "we would stop being safe." Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did, like a door inside him had quietly closed. And then, as he finally stood, his phone vibrated once with a delayed security alert showing a hallway camera feed marked missing. Exactly 12 minutes of footage erased from the wing leading to Naomi's home classroom, and the timestamp matched the moment the lock was first placed on her lunchbox. Nathaniel didn't put his phone away. He stood there in the middle of the cafeteria like the noise around him had been turned into glass, present, sharp but separate. The missing 12 minutes of hallway footage glowed on his screen again. Timestamped 7:41 to 7:53 a.m. Naomi stayed close, her hand still pressed over her pocket where the key was hidden, as if she was guarding something alive. What happened at 7:45? Nathaniel asked quietly, not to the room but to the air itself. Naomi blinked. That's when she took my lunchbox, she said, pointing without hesitation at Veronica. Veronica Hale smiled too quickly. We follow routine inspections every morning, she replied, but her voice lifted half a note higher than before, like a door not fully closed. Nathaniel turned slightly toward her. Not aggressive, not loud, just enough. Then there should be footage, he said. Veronica's fingers tightened around her phone. Sometimes the hallway cameras glitch during maintenance cycles, she answered, but she didn't look at him while speaking. Naomi shifted her weight. She wasn't supposed to be in my classroom before first period, she said suddenly, small but precise. I got there early because the heater in our apartment was broken and I couldn't sleep. Nathaniel's gaze lowered to her. What time did you arrive? Naomi didn't hesitate. 7:38. I remember because the microwave clock was blinking wrong when Mama packed my lunch. That detail landed heavier than it should have. Nathaniel glanced at the cafeteria wall clock. It read 8:12. But the school bell schedule printed beside it showed first period beginning at 8 o'clock sharp. Something didn't align. Somewhere nearby, a TV mounted in the staff corner played a muted morning broadcast, too cheerful for the room it hung in. A dishwasher rumbled behind the kitchen doors. Normal sounds. Wrong timing. Veronica stepped forward slightly. This is becoming unnecessary, she said gently, like she was trying to soothe a child rather than defend herself. The child is confused. Naomi looked up at her immediately. I'm not confused, she said. You said my lunchbox was damaged before I even opened it. A pause. Small. Noticeable. Veronica blinked once too slowly. Nathaniel saw it. He didn't react outwardly, but he took a step back instead, as if distance would sharpen the picture forming in front of him. He opened a second file on his phone, cafeteria staff entry logs. At 7:44 a.m., Veronica had badge swiped into the east hallway. At 7:46 a.m., the same badge had been recorded entering the security office, but no exit was logged. And at 7:47 a.m., Naomi's lunchbox had been sealed and locked. 3 events. Too close together to be routine. Naomi suddenly spoke again, softer this time. She told me not to tell anyone I saw her in the hallway before class, she said. But she wasn't alone. Veronica's expression finally shifted. Not anger, not fear, but calculation trying to recover too late. Nathaniel looked down at his screen again. A system note had just refreshed itself automatically. Security footage partially restored. One frame preview loaded for half a second before freezing. It showed Veronica standing in the hallway holding something small in her hand before the camera cut out completely. The timestamp on that frame was 7:46 and 11 seconds a.m. The exact second the lunchbox lock had been closed. The moment Nathaniel closed his phone, 2 security guards had already appeared at the edge of the cafeteria, like they had been waiting for a silent signal. They didn't rush. They didn't raise their voices. They simply positioned themselves between Naomi and the rest of the room, as if the space around her had suddenly become restricted property. Sir, one of them said carefully, addressing Nathaniel without breaking eye contact with Naomi. We recommend this matter be handled by school administration before it escalates further. Behind them, Veronica Hale adjusted her blazer and stepped forward with a composed smile that belonged to meetings, not moments like this. Mr. Whitmore, she said softly, we understand your concern, but this is a sensitive environment. A child may misunderstand routine disciplinary procedures. Naomi held the key, tighter in her pocket. She didn't step back, even as the space around her narrowed. She wasn't in a meeting, Naomi said suddenly, her voice steady but small. She was in my hallway before class started. She was looking for something in my lunchbox. A brief silence followed, not because no one heard her, but because everyone did. One of the board members standing near the glass wall let out a quiet breath, like he was deciding how far to step into something he wished he hadn't seen. Veronica turned slightly toward Naomi, still smiling, but her eyes sharpened just enough to warn. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "that's a very serious accusation for someone your age to make without understanding context." Nathaniel noticed how carefully she chose each word. "No anger, no aggression." Just precision designed to shrink the speaker without ever touching her. Naomi didn't look away. "I understand what I saw," she said. A security guard leaned in closer to Nathaniel. "Sir, we can move the child to the administrative office. We'll resolve discrepancies through proper channels." That word, resolve, hung in the air like something too clean for what was happening. Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked past them all, toward the cafeteria windows. Outside, rain had thickened into steady streaks, blurring the world beyond the glass. Inside, the polished floor reflected too many people standing too still. Then a woman in a tailored coat entered through the side door. Expensive, controlled, familiar in the way people become familiar when they believe they belong in every room. "Nathaniel," she said, as if the tension were an inconvenience, not a crisis. "We need to be careful about how this looks. Media sensitivity alone." She stopped when she saw Naomi, not out of surprise, out of assessment. Naomi instinctively placed her hand over her pocket again. "This is Claire Whitmore," the woman added smoothly, as if introducing order back into chaos. "My fiancé's office has a responsibility to protect the school's reputation." Naomi looked up at Claire. "She was the one who told the driver to change yesterday," she said quietly. The air shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that Nathaniel felt it before anyone else acknowledged it. Claire's expression didn't break, but something behind it recalculated. "That's not possible," she said lightly. "I've never spoken to any driver about school operations." Naomi nodded once. "You said it on the phone in the garden hallway. I heard you when I was waiting outside the office." A pause. Then Claire smiled again, smaller this time. "Children sometimes confuse adult conversations they overhear," she said gently, "especially when they don't understand context." Veronica quickly stepped in, relieved to redirect. "Exactly," she agreed. "This is becoming an emotional interpretation issue rather than a factual one." But as she spoke, Nathaniel's gaze dropped slightly. On the polished marble near Veronica's heel, a faint dark smear marked the floor, like something had been stepped on and quickly dragged away. His eyes followed it just a few inches, then stopped, because the smear led directly toward the staff corridor door, which had been closed a second too slowly after Claire entered. And just above the handle, a small digital access panel blinked once. Red, before switching back to green, as if it had just accepted a late override. No one else seemed to notice, but Nathaniel did. And for the first time, he didn't look at Naomi like a child surrounded by adults. He looked at the room like it had just failed a lock it insisted was never touched. Nathaniel stood still for a long moment, watching the staff corridor door where the access panel had flashed red, then green, like it had corrected a mistake it wasn't supposed to make. No one else seemed to register it. The guards were still focused on Naomi. Claire Whitmore had already shifted her attention back to Nathaniel, as if the conversation had never left her control. But Naomi was no longer looking at any of them. She reached into her pocket slowly, carefully, and pulled out the silver key again. Not to show it, to protect it. "Don't let them take it again," she said quietly, almost to herself. Nathaniel's eyes dropped to the key. For the first time, he didn't see it as an object. He saw it as a piece of something, unfinished. "Where did your mother hide this before the lunchbox?" he asked softly. Naomi hesitated. "In a box under the sink," she said. "But she moved it after someone came to our apartment last week." That detail landed differently now. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he slowly took a step back from the crowd, signaling without words that he was no longer listening to the room. Claire's voice followed him. "Nathaniel, we can handle this privately." There's no need to involve security records but he had already turned away. Naomi followed instinctively, staying close without being told. The hallway outside the cafeteria was quieter, colder, lit by recessed ceiling lights that made everything look slightly unreal. Nathaniel pulled out his phone again and opened a secure archive labeled Whitmore Incident 12. Inside was a sealed folder he had not accessed in years. Naomi watched him without speaking, her small hands still clenched around her lunchbox strap. Then Nathaniel stopped walking. A second file had appeared in the archive. New.
Timestamped 3:14 a.m.
He didn't authorize it. Inside was a scanned image of a hospital bracelet. Elise Carter's name, but the date of admission was wrong. Off by exactly 1 day. Nathaniel stared at it longer than necessary. The fluorescent hallway lights hummed softly above them, and somewhere far down the corridor, a vending machine cycled with a mechanical click. He zoomed in again. The bracelet had been reissued under a different intake code, one that linked directly to a private clinic owned by a Whitmore Foundation subsidiary. Naomi tugged lightly on his sleeve. "That's my mom's name," she said. Nathaniel didn't answer right away. His thumb hovered over the screen, then moved to another file. Payment record. Large. Quiet. Routed through a legal trust account. The beneficiary line had been partially redacted, but not enough. Claire Whitmore's legal signature pattern appeared in the authorization trail. Nathaniel lowered the phone slightly, as if the weight of it had changed. Behind him, footsteps approached quickly. Veronica Hale again, voice controlled but tighter now. "Mr. Whitmore, this is escalating. Beyond a school matter. We strongly advise you to—" He raised one hand without looking at her. Not to silence her. To pause her. Naomi looked up at him. "My mom said someone would try to change the records," she whispered. Nathaniel finally exhaled, slow and controlled, like he was forcing air through something closing inside his chest. Then he reopened the hospital file, scrolled once more, and stopped at the signature line that should have belonged to an attending physician, but instead showed a corporate approval stamp. And for the first time since the key fell to the floor, Nathaniel Whitmore stopped looking at Naomi's pocket and started looking at the people who had been closest to him for years. The hallway outside the cafeteria had gone quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the building itself had stopped reacting to what was happening inside it. Nathaniel Whitmore stood near the windowed corridor wall, the hospital bracelet still open on his phone screen, its wrong date burning into his focus. Naomi lingered a few feet away, not approaching, just waiting. Like she understood that answers didn't belong to her yet, but she refused to leave without them. "I don't want money," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was small, but steady. "I just want them to stop saying my mom did something wrong when she didn't." Nathaniel didn't look at her immediately. Instead, he turned his phone slightly and made a single call. Not to the police. Not to the school. To a private number labeled Holt Medical Audit. The rain outside thickened against the glass, sliding in uneven lines like something trying to erase the view. Somewhere behind them, a TV in a staff lounge murmured softly, too low to understand, and a vending machine clicked once as it finished a cycle. Nathaniel spoke quietly into the phone. "I need every admission record tied to Elise Carter," he said. "Every revision, every edit, every access log from the last 12 years. A pause. Then, yes, include internal overrides." Naomi watched him without blinking. Not hopeful, not fearful, just present, like she was finally being included in something she had already survived alone. Claire. Whitmore's heels echoed faintly from the far end of the corridor, but she didn't come closer. Nathaniel ended the call and opened another file, this one a financial ledger tied to a foundation hospital account. His eyes slowed as he scanned it. One transaction repeated itself across multiple years. Quarterly payments labeled administrative compensation, routed through 3 separate shell departments before landing in the same final account. The name attached to the final approval signature made him stop breathing for half a second longer than he intended. A reflection of Naomi's face flickered in the glass beside him, small and still, as she leaned slightly against the wall, holding her lunchbox like it mattered more than anything else in the building. Nathaniel scrolled again, slower now. The approval trail did not belong to a random administrator. It belonged to someone whose signature he had personally authorized on executive trust privileges years ago, someone he had defended in board meetings, someone he had trusted to manage sensitive oversight when he stopped paying attention to the details himself. The rain against the window deepened, steady and soft, like the world outside had no idea anything inside had just shifted. Nathaniel lowered the phone slightly. For the first time since this began, he didn't look at Naomi, or the key, or the hospital file. He looked at the signature again, closer this time, as if distance had been the problem all along. And quietly, without anyone hearing him say it, Nathaniel Whitmore realized the person he had trusted the longest was the one who had been standing closest to the truth the entire time. Nathaniel didn't move for several seconds after the realization settled in. The corridor felt narrower now, like the walls had absorbed what he just understood and were refusing to give it back. Naomi stood quietly beside him, watching his face instead of asking questions. She didn't need to. Something in his stillness had already changed the rules of the room. Then Nathaniel spoke, calm and controlled, as if nothing inside him had cracked at all. "Bring Veronica Hale back here," he said to no one in particular. A guard hesitated. Nathaniel didn't raise his voice. "Now." Naomi shifted slightly, her fingers tightening around the lunchbox strap. "She always checks the time before she lies," Naomi said suddenly, almost like she was remembering something unimportant. Nathaniel looked at her. "What do you mean?" "At 7:46, she said softly. She looked at the hallway clock before she locked my lunchbox, like she was making sure she had enough time. Nathaniel's eyes didn't change, but something behind them aligned. "Good," he said quietly. "Then she'll remember it again." Veronica returned with a composed expression, but her steps were slightly faster than before. Claire Whitmore followed at a distance, watching without interrupting. The hallway lights flickered once overhead, barely noticeable, but enough to make the silence feel heavier. Nathaniel placed his phone on a small marble table between them. On the screen, the security log was already open. "We're going to clarify something simple," he said evenly. Veronica smiled politely. "Of course." Nathaniel nodded toward Naomi. "Tell her what you told me." Naomi looked at Veronica directly. "You were in the hallway before class," she said. "At 7:46, you looked at the clock before you touched my lunchbox." Veronica didn't react immediately. Then she gave a soft laugh. "That's very specific for a child." Nathaniel didn't look at her. He tapped the screen once. A frozen frame appeared on the phone, grainy but clear enough. Veronica standing near the hallway clock. Her wrist raised slightly, a keycard in her hand. The timestamp read 7:46 and 11 seconds a.m. The same second the lunchbox had been locked. The air shifted, not dramatically, quietly, like a door had been closed somewhere no one admitted was open. Veronica's smile held, but it no longer reached her eyes. "Security footage can be misleading," she said carefully. Claire stepped slightly forward. "Nathaniel, you're interpreting incomplete data." Naomi tilted her head just a little. "That's not incomplete," she said. "That's the moment you stopped looking at me and looked at the clock." A silence stretched, long enough for the vending machine down the hall to click as it reset, long enough for a phone on the marble table to vibrate once, displaying an incoming call labeled Hale Foundation Compliance. No one touched it. Nathaniel didn't speak again. He simply slid the frozen frame closer to Veronica. Not accusing, not emotional, just close enough that she couldn't pretend it wasn't real. And for the first time, Veronica's hand hovered slightly above the phone, as if deciding whether silence or action would destroy her faster. And she realized, with a slow tightening in her expression, that Naomi was no longer the only one watching her anymore. The doors to the executive conference room closed with a soft, controlled click that sounded heavier than it should have. Inside, the lighting was colder than the hallway, reflecting off the long glass table where Nathaniel Whitmore had asked everyone to gather without explanation. Veronica stood on one side, Claire Whitmore slightly behind her, and a senior school administrator near the far end of the room, all of them maintaining expressions carefully shaped for situations that had not yet officially become crises. Naomi stood close to Nathaniel's chair, her hands resting on the edge of her lunchbox like it was the only stable object in the room. Nathaniel placed his phone on the table again, but this time he connected it to the room's display. The screen lit up immediately. A folder opened. Audio file. Unlabeled. Veronica's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. "Where did you get that?" she asked quietly. Nathaniel didn't answer. He pressed play. The room filled with a low, distorted recording, hallway audio, faint but clear enough to recognize voices. Veronica's voice came through first, calm and procedural. "Seal it before she arrives. The timing has to match the inspection window." A second voice responded, confirming steps about the lunchbox, the hallway clock, and the camera reset cycle. Naomi didn't move. She only looked at the screen as if she had already heard it before in fragments she never fully understood. Claire stepped forward quickly. "This recording is incomplete," she said. "Audio can be taken out of context." Nathaniel raised one hand slightly, not looking at her. The recording continued. "Veronica again. Make sure the key never leaves the lunchbox after 7:46. After that, it won't matter what she says." Pause in the audio. Then the sound of a locker closing. Naomi's fingers tightened around the edge of her lunchbox, but her voice stayed steady. "That's the time," she said quietly. That's when she looked at the clock. Nathaniel's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes finally broke its restraint. He rewound the audio and played a second file immediately. This one was clearer. A scanned contract appeared on screen alongside it, school compliance authorization linked to medical and foundation funding streams. Claire's signature appeared on multiple approval lines across unrelated departments. The administrator at the table took a step back without realizing it. Veronica's composure began to thin at the edges. "Nathaniel," Claire said carefully, "you're reacting to connected systems without full review." He finally looked at her. Not sharply, just long enough. The audio continued beneath the silence in the room. Another voice, Veronica's, now unmistakably calm, almost routine. "If the records are adjusted correctly, no one will trace the entry time." Naomi lifted her head slightly. "You told me I was early," she said, not accusing, just stating. "But you were already there." The room didn't respond. Even the administrator avoided looking at the screen now. Nathaniel reached forward and expanded the contract file. A medical approval stamp matched the same hospital system tied to Elise Carter's altered admission records. The connection was no longer implied. It was mapped. Claire's hand slowly lowered from her side. Veronica didn't speak anymore. Nathaniel sat back slightly in his chair. For a moment, he looked like someone remembering too many doors he had never thought to open. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Then he removed his glasses, placed them carefully beside the phone, and without looking at anyone in the room said, "Call my attorney." The attorney arrived before anyone else spoke again. No announcement, no introduction, just a quiet presence that changed the temperature of the room. Within minutes, the executive conference space that had once felt untouchable turned into something procedural, measured, and irreversible. Nathaniel didn't raise his voice even once. He didn't need to. The recordings were already copied. The contracts already flagged. The audit trail already opened. Veronica stood near the table, her hands still, as if movement itself had become risky. Claire Whitmore had stopped trying to reframe anything. Naomi remained in the same spot, close to Nathaniel, but no longer alone in the way she had been since this morning. The attorney placed a folder on the glass table and spoke calmly. "We've initiated a full freeze on the affiliated accounts pending investigation." The words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded final. Veronica exhaled slowly, as if trying to hold on to composure that was no longer supported by evidence. "This is a misunderstanding of operational procedures," she said, but her voice no longer carried certainty. Nathaniel opened the folder in front of him and stopped at a single page. Not the contracts, not the payments. A personnel approval sheet tied to Elise Carter's hospital records and Naomi's school access logs. The same signature pattern appeared across both systems. Claire's. Naomi looked up slightly, not at the documents, but at Nathaniel. "My mom didn't do anything wrong," she said quietly, like she was stating something she had always known but had never been allowed to prove. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he closed the folder and set it down with controlled precision. "I know," he said. It was the first simple certainty in the room all day. The attorney continued speaking, explaining suspension protocols, compliance audits, and protective measures for witnesses. Veronica finally looked at Nathaniel directly. "You're destroying years of coordination based on one manipulated interpretation of data," she said, her voice steadier now, but thinner. Nathaniel finally turned toward her. "No," he said calmly. "I ignored years of data. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was occupied by everything that had been overlooked." Naomi shifted slightly closer to him, then reached into her pocket and took out the silver key again. She didn't hold it up this time. She just placed it on the table. The sound it made against the glass was small, but it carried across the entire room. The attorney glanced at it once and nodded. "We can trace this to the original vault authorization chain," he said quietly. That sentence changed everything. Veronica stepped back half a step. Claire's eyes dropped for the first time. Outside the glass walls, the city continued moving, unaware of the decisions being finalized inside. Nathaniel looked at Naomi. Not the documents, not the signatures, not the systems, but her. "You weren't wrong," he said. Naomi nodded once, as if she had never expected to be. Within the hour, formal notices were issued. Administrative control of the Foundation hospital systems was removed from Claire's office pending investigation. Veronica was escorted out of her position without public statement. Her access revoked across all school and donor facilities. Contracts tied to falsified records were suspended for review. Elise Carter's medical file was officially corrected and sealed under protected witness review, restoring her record across all affiliated institutions. Naomi didn't react to any of it at first. Not until later, when a new letter was handed to her mother, official, stamped, simple. Full restoration of employment, compensation, and housing support through the Foundation's corrective fund. That night, Naomi sat in a quieter room than she was used to, holding a small glass of warm milk in both hands. Nathaniel stood near the doorway, not interrupting, not leaving. She looked down at the glass, then up at him. "They finally stopped changing things," she said softly. Nathaniel nodded once. "No," he replied gently. "We did." And for the first time since the lunchbox was locked, the room didn't feel like it was holding a secret anymore. It felt like it was finally allowed to breathe, as the truth settled into place and stayed there.